If you came from a home where mom and dad loved each other, they communicated openly, they were married for years, never experienced divorce, maybe that's the thing that you wanted to so capture and emulate. But maybe you came from a broken family. Maybe mom and dad didn't talk. Maybe they got divorced when you were young, and you wanted to rewrite that story for your narrative and maybe have a beautiful marriage, one that you could be proud of. But today you find yourself getting the thing that you dreamt about, having your children, being married, and maybe it's just not experience and expectation. I talk about that a lot on this show. You have an expectation for how you think something is going to go. Marriage is going to be beautiful. I'm going to marry my best friend. We're going to talk all the time. We're going to have fun. It's always going to be great. Things are going to be smooth. And then the actual experience of it, when you don't connect quite well with your wife or things didn't work out. I think what's fascinating is that in your story, being an athlete, you had film study. You had the ability to watch a game and break down what worked, what didn't work well. When things worked well, you had the ability to build upon that. Okay, I'm going to do more of that, which is great. When things didn't go well, as much as it might, be a struggle to watch yourself on screen and be like, darn it, why did I make that throw? Nobody's going to blame you, Christian, when you got 300-pound linemen that can run 4.340s coming after you. None of us have been in that level of pressure. I think we can sometimes be in the thick of being a parent and being married and assume that we're facing pressure, but you experience real pressure on a sports field. But you did have the ability of practice. You did have the ability of watching film. You did have the ability of having teammates and accountability and coaches that specifically worked on your skill set. When you're married, there is none of that. There's those funny commercials on TV today of throwing the red challenge flag of like, did you pack the thing? And it's like, no, you said you were going to do it. And they throw the challenge flag and it's like, let's watch together. I think those commercials are hysterical when you're married because it's like, man, how many disagreements would my wife and I be working through if we had the challenge flag? But I think it's fascinating with your life now after sports because you've been in that situation, being in NCAA football, NFL, team camaraderie, all of that. And now you're Christian post NFL, working on the things that you're passionate about. But as you said, you're also a dad and you're married. Are there certain things that have translated over from the sports field that you've taken into, life as a dad and a husband? Or are there things that maybe you assumed would be easier because you had this experience in the NFL? So like how hard could marriage and parenting be? Because you were in the spotlight for a majority of your life in sports. And so it's like, now I'm a dad, this has got to be easy compared to that. Has there been any, like, I didn't assume this was going to be this way, or like, I actually have to like step back because like, man, this is harder than I thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I think everything tends to be harder than we think it is. I think we downplay often in our expectations how difficult things are going to be. I think especially in today's era of social media where everything looks great, on the outside, and as you compare your life with someone else's life, and if all I'm doing is looking at Twitter and Instagram and whatever social media outlet that you spend your time on, um, everything looks easy out there. And I can't remember who I heard say this, but um, and you talked about expectations, but that pretty much every issue in our own personal lives can be traced back to unmet expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that's intentionally led expectations that were lied about, and it was intentional to create a impossibly something that could never be met. If it was a lack of communication that led to different unmet expectations, if it was just a naivete that led to unmet expectations. But I think especially in marriage or parenting, I think when we don't meet the expectation of our spouse or our child, or we don't meet the expectation of our coworkers, or we don't meet the expectation of investors or whoever, there are real problems that come out of that. And so, same thing with performance in sports, right? Like, I had to meet the expectation of being a first round draft pick. There was a lot of pressure that came with that, and figuring out how to deal with that. It gets hard. And I think trying not to do it in isolation is really important. I think finding the right people, the right advisors, the right spaces to be authentically open about our brokenness and our insecurities, and where we need help. I think that's really difficult. I think there are two things going on. It's interesting, right? Like, I think there is this rise in conversations around mental health, and and that it's okay to not be okay. But it almost seems like they're great taglines, and there's some like social media play to talk about our brokenness that's still for likes and not necessarily for true authenticity and growth.
That'll preach.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
how you have to find the right avenues to do it. And the other thing I've learned too is, you brought up the insecurities of, I brought up insecurities before, and yes, you're right in the sense that I was insecure on the field as a football player, but I'm insecure in all areas of my life. I've grown up as a very shy kid. I think that shyness was rooted in insecurity and being afraid to be authentically who I was in front of other people. And like I made my younger brother go ask for ketchup, McDonald's, because I was too afraid to go do it. And I think one thing I've learned is I look back on my life, um, the areas where I have the most regret are all rooted in insecurity, right? The things that I wish that I did do that I did not do, the barrier for me of doing those things was rooted in insecurity. I was too scared to do it. I was afraid to fail. Or the things that I did do that I wish I didn't do, I made fun of the other kid, the dumb joke, the immature moment of doing whatever. I did those things out of insecurity to be the funny guy, to get more likes, and so what is, and with the help of my wife, like, what are the real roots of these insecurities that I feel? Why do they manifest in the way that they manifest? And again, it goes back to investing in the self-awareness key, part of it. And I went through, when I was done playing, as I was transitioning out of being a football player to figuring out what was next for me, spent a lot of time in the self-awareness process of, doing the Enneagrams and Myers-Briggs and talking to people and, um, you know, just trying to figure out who I was and how I operated. And a lot of that work was tremendously helpful. Again, it's one thing to get that information. The next step is, what do I do with that information that's actually beneficial? And I'm still working on that, right? I've got great information. I've done some of the work. I haven't done enough of the work to come out on the other side of it better. I don't think that work ever ends. I don't think we ever arrive
Sure.
to that moment, but um, and I'm still trying to find the right resources and tools that are helpful. But I think when we invest in that self-awareness part of it, we at least have a roadmap, or then can create a roadmap that, helps us to be better husbands or spouses and parents and leaders of businesses and, again, all areas of life.